It's been 10 years. You start to forget the things you should remember, and you can't stop remembering the things you should forget. That's just a quote from Call of Duty that I wanted to say. I'm not actually being that dramatic. Today marks the 4-year anniversary of MeepCity being closed by Roblox and the probable forced removal of the infamous parties feature. 2026, however, marks the 10-year anniversary of the party feature being added, as on September 27, 2016, Roblox would change forever. Every year on February 16th, we check in on Roblox's formerly most visited game to see how it's doing since perhaps the largest hub for online dating in gaming history was removed. And even though parties have been gone for 4 years now, MeepCity continues to be the source of numerous incidents and fascinating stats, and the last year has been no different. A ton has happened since our last visit, so let's take a look at MeepCity's metrics and community and see how it fell off harder than maybe any Roblox game ever. Roblox's first game to hit 1 billion visits and most visited game from 2017 to 2020 has fallen off on historic levels in the last year. During its heyday, MeepCity was getting anywhere from 8 million to 11 million visits per day on anywhere from around 60,000 to as high as 100,000 concurrent users. The infamous NSFW parties inside the game seemingly played a small role, combining for a few thousand concurrent users or maybe 10% of players at any given time. Despite parties accounting for a seemingly small portion of players, they brought in weirdos and online daters to both the parties and the rest of the game too. MeepCity became a meeting ground for violative users, and that could not have been more evident by the drop in players throughout the years. In the first week after the party removal alone, MeepCity saw a decrease of around 2 million visits per day, quickly showing how prevalent they actually were. Only a year later, MeepCity had dropped from around 9,250,000 visits per day to around 3,920,000 visits per day for a 57.6% decrease. Year 2 saw an even larger decrease from that 9 million to 1,170,000 for an 87.35% drop and a 70.1% drop from the same time a year prior. MeepCity continued to fall off, as by the time year 3 rolled around, it saw a 94% drop from 3 years ago and a 85.9% drop from a year prior. And now here we are on year 4, which has seen the most dramatic and perhaps most historic drop in daily visits amongst any active game in Roblox history. At this time last year, MeepCity averaged around 550,000 visits per day on 5,250 concurrent users and a 13-ish minute session/playtime. The visits and CCUs were so far from their peak that you couldn't imagine it severely going down more, but shockingly, MeepCity fell off worse than ever before. MeepCity currently receives around 53,500 visits per day, representing a 99.4% drop in daily visits prior to the party removal and a 90% drop since this time in 2025. In just a year, from February 2025 to February 2026, MeepCity saw a 90% drop in daily visits and also around a 95% decrease in concurrent users. Now, some of you may be wondering how a game that was already perceived to be somewhat dead and stale saw such a sharp decline in metrics. MeepCity wasn't shut down at any time, there weren't any mechanic changes or rebrands, nor had we really ever seen a yearly decline that big in its history. Well, the answer is one that is both pretty expected yet extremely startling, and of course it has to do with online daters, degens, and predators. During the aftermath of Roblox banning Schlep in August 2025, thousands of people began calling for the closure of MeepCity. It had been known as a hotspot for NSFW activity for years, with the about-year-old bio feature and avatar editor continuing to enable it. Roblox initially publicly showed support for MeepCity by name, saying that they couldn't punish it for the actions of players despite it seemingly violating the TOS. 5 days later though, on August 20th, Roblox may have quietly forced action upon MeepCity, as its avatar editor, bio feature, saved outfits, and a whisper feature were suddenly removed. The features online daters, degens, and predators used while sitting in spawn to solicit dates, condo activity, and personal info were finally removed. With the main attractions enabling their behavior being removed, many assumed MeepCity's metrics would drop, and they certainly did. In just 10 days, MeepCity's concurrent users went from 5,500 to only a few hundred, for a 93% decrease in players, and also saw a 77% drop in daily visits. This might have been the biggest metrics drop in 10 days for a game that wasn't banned ever, but it couldn't tell the full story since school starting up would have played a part. Obviously, weirdos leaving played a part, but school starting affects every game on the platform, and MeepCity was no different. There was one stat that wouldn't have been drastically or maybe even slightly affected by school though, and that is session length. Session length isn't dependent on CCUs or daily visits, it's dependent on how people play the game, and there was a shift in how people played following its updates. In a single day following the removal of bios and custom avatars, MeepCity's session length dropped 60% from 13-ish minutes to around 5 minutes. This showed a massive shift in how the majority of players played the game in just one day, and the reason for it was super easy to pinpoint. MeepCity players with the longest session lengths were often online daters, degens, and predators who would sit in spawn for long periods of time. They did that to show off their bad avatars, or to solicit dates, personal info, and condo activity through their bios. When custom avatars and bios got removed, the people playing MeepCity for them would have left, and they just happened to have long session lengths. When the people with long session lengths left the game, the stats immediately dropped, and those who had long session lengths were very often violative, dangerous weirdos. This stat points towards a mass exodus of online daters, degens, and predators being the cause of MeepCity's metric decline. Judging by these stats, it's possible that over 50% of MeepCity's then 5,500 concurrent users were people looking to engage in violative or dangerous behavior. These days, Roblox's former #1 game that at times had over 100,000 CCUs and 10 million daily visits now sometimes dips below 100 CCUs and 50,000 daily visits. And judging by when these sharp declines began, that can largely be attributed to weirdos leaving the game after the features that enabled their behavior were altered or removed. You'd think there wouldn't be much to say about MeepCity's current players since there aren't many left, but we did have a major scare earlier this year. These days, MeepCity is mostly inhabited by a small handful of players who don't do a whole lot outside of build houses and play normally. There are evidently some weirdos still around, but they're not as prevalent or widely harmful as they used to be. It appears to mostly just be random kids who want a town and city type of roleplay house building game to play, not those looking to do bad things. That doesn't mean that MeepCity isn't a place weirdos know they're welcome in though, because January saw a major spike in players and it was almost entirely bad. 2016 to 2018 nostalgia bait TikTok started trending, and that somehow led to online daters, degens, and predators remaking MeepCity parties in the game's estate feature. Weirdos began advertising dates and times for people to join MeepCity to find a house where all kinds of horrible parties were being recreated. These often Epstein-themed parties were generating thousands of players for a few days before Roblox probably stepped in once again. After 4 or 5 days of estate parties almost quadrupling MeepCity's CCUs and visits, updates were made to the pillars and possibly a few days later, the beds. The infamous pillars that had been abused since 2017 were made a bit fatter, possibly to block people's views or to make them harder to dance around, although it was still abusable. A pretty smart change was made to beds though, which saw invisible walls added when a person lied down on one to prevent more people from going on it. I don't know how that took so long to come up with, but both updates and possibly other unknown actions seemed to help as the estate parties disappeared. Even though this reign of terror only lasted around a week, it showed that online daters, degens, and predators still viewed it as a place to congregate in. MeepCity carried a reputation amongst disgusting people so strong that thousands of people flocked to the game knowing they'd find and be able to participate in NSFW stuff. Although MeepCity's players aren't as bad as before, that incident proved there's an entire armada of weirdos waiting in the shadows for their opportunity to return. The 10th most visited game in Roblox history is facing one of the harshest declines in activity Roblox has ever seen, and it largely has to do with NSFW activity being prevented. Parties, custom avatars, and bios have all been removed, and furniture like poles and beds, which were once removed from parties yet later re-added, were altered as well. Every sudden large decline in metrics since 2022 coincides with the removal or alteration of an abused feature, and now that there are basically none left, the game is at its lowest. Its decline in popularity can be blamed on numerous things, including a lack of updates making the game stale, but it's clear the exodus of weirdos plays a big part. MeepCity provides a cautionary tale of how dangerous an innocent game can become when its players are not handled accordingly. Both Alex Neutron and Roblox didn't take enough action to prevent violative and dangerous activity from occurring, leading to MeepCity becoming a breeding ground for Roblox's worst. Who knows how it would have turned out if more care was taken, and if MeepCity would still be the powerhouse town and city roleplay game it was before parties. I do one of these videos every year, and the plan from the start was to do 5 of them since parties were around for 5.5 years. With the rate the game's going though, I'm not sure there'll be any players left to talk about by the time the 5-year anniversary rolls around. Unless MeepCity is somehow massively rejuvenated and Roblox starts promoting it again, which I doubt, the game seems to be nearing the end of its life. Outside of a ton of weirdos returning in January, we've not seen any signs of a notable rise in players since bios and custom avatars were removed in August. The end of MeepCity may be upon us, but let us never forget what happened in it for so many years to ensure a danger like it is never seen again.